We are forward thinkers, bridge builders, regulation innovators, and ideas instigators. We are the SARE community. We work across the energy, mobility, tech, media, and telecom sectors to move regulation forward.
We are a community of remarkable people, rich in our diversity.
We are economists, policy scholars,
energy and regulatory economists,
lawyers, and engineers
from renowned universities around Europe. We provide decision makers with original and concrete recommendations to help them develop rules that safeguard European citizens' rights, nurture fair competition, and foster innovation. We hold our research to the highest standards of quality and independence. We build bridges, we enhance cooperation and dialogue between different actors, sectors, and agendas. Since 2010, we have published more than 100 studies offering new ideas to address societal challenges. We have grown from 13 to 50 members, regulators, companies, and academic centers from across the world. We have brought together global CEOs, political leaders, leading regulators and thinkers to debate burning issues. We have established our think tank as a reference for independent top-quality research towards European and national decision makers.
We are unique.
We are SARE.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. I must start with an apologies. We have a new system, and we have been testing it for a week. Everything was working perfectly smoothly, and of course, when we just were about to go live and start this new workshop, this new seminar, things got wrong, and we were stuck with one or two speakers. So we eventually ready to leave. I'm really sorry that we're starting with nearly 20 minutes delay, but I'm very glad because we have more than 150 people who have registered to view this and participate in this. This afternoon we're going to talk about telecommunications and more specifically about OpenRAN, which stands for Open Radio Access Network. And we're doing so because we are publishing today a new report which is called Open Interfaces and Innovations in Telecommunications. And this is authored by two of our lead academics, Marc Bourreau, academic co-director of SARE, and I see that this is not his picture. So this is really not the afternoon technically. And Walter Lemstra, a research fellow. Marc Bourreau is a professor at Telecom Paris Polytechnique. And Walter, this is the right picture. And Walter is teaching at Neon Road and researching there too. So in order to save time, I will save you a longer introduction, and I suggest we move immediately to the presentation of the report by Marc and Walter. You can, of course, put questions, and you can use the channels that you are using to view us, LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, and use the chat function there. And after that, we have a great panel to discuss this, and I will introduce the panel after the presentation. So without any more delay, let's move to the presentation of the report, and I think, Marc Bourreau, you will start. Marc?
Pleasure to be here and to present this new SARE study about OpenRAN. So let me introduce first the report and this presentation, this short presentation. So OpenRAN is a new architecture for mobile networks that allows operators to mix and match interoperable RAN components from different vendors. So next slide, please. And OpenRAN overall aims to reduce network cost for mobile operators, facilitate innovation for new products and services, and also ultimately increase competition and innovation in the supply chain. So the development of OpenRAN has been supported by the ORAN Alliance, and in particular, so it consists in standardizing and opening up the interface between the radio unit, which is typically mounted on top of towers, and the distributed unit. And this interface is typically referred to as the front hall interface. So in this short presentation, what we will do first is to highlight the importance of an open front-hall interface to lower entry barriers for suppliers and thereby promote competition and innovation. And then we will present in a second step a more detailed assessment about the potential economic impact of open interfaces on competition and innovation. So let's start with the first part of the study and the presentation. So over to you, Walter.
Mark, for the introduction, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this seminar. My role here is to do a little introduction in terms of the background to the OpenRAN initiative, and I think it is good that I provide a few words, a few insights on that before I go into the resilience aspect of the initiative, and then to be followed again by Mark on the economic and innovation side of the initiative. So starting with this first slide, going back in time, we started off our journey in mobile networking with 1G, essentially a system of national focus, whereby we had, say it black and white, one country, one standard, one operator, and one leading supplier. That resulted in a very fragmented market in Europe. Now, that we resolved with 2G, where we had a regional standard, coordination between all stakeholders, and we opened up the backhaul interface so that there was a possibility for multiple suppliers to come into the market. And we had roughly more than 2 times the RAN suppliers compared to the core suppliers. That created a very dynamic equipment market in the 2G era. As we moved to 3G, we got hindered or kind of interrupted by the bubble that burst, the bubble of the internet and the telecom, and we had a consolidation of the market, which resulted in essentially 2 integrated suppliers surviving in Europe. That is Ericsson and Nokia. And then a few years later, we got the entry of Huawei into the European market. Now, moving to 4G and ultimately 5G, the architecture didn't change. But operators mainly bought integrated systems from their suppliers. They may have bought 2 systems, but they then regionally separated them for ease of maintenance and upkeep. So we have essentially a fully integrated environment in the lead up to 5G. Now with 5G, the standardization opened up, or we already had the opening up of the backhaul interface. The ETSI and 3GPP standardization also opened up the mid-haul, and that is where the intervention of the OpenRAN initiative started. Next slide, please. The introduction of the new interface, the front-haul interface, is essentially lowering of the barrier to entry. And this is essentially one of the only means that operators have to intervene in the supply side of the market, lowering the barrier to entry, hoping that new providers come in and increase the rivalry in the market. And that is what the OpenRAN is all about, increasing the resilience of the equipment supply side of the market. It's not only about the RAN equipment and the RAN hardware and software, but also about the RAN intelligent controller, which makes entry of solution providers to optimize the RAN network also possible. Next slide, please. If we look at the resilience, next slide, please. If we look at the initiative, the idea is that we get multiple vendors entering the market here in Europe and in the rest of the world. This overview gives an impression of the radio side as well as the software side where we stand today. And for instance, on the integrated chips and components, we have NXP as a provider, and we hope we get more. And candidates providers are, of course, Infineon and STMicroelectronics, who have a track record in the telecommunication area. On the software side, of course, solution operators can join, also integrators can join, so there is more opportunity. And on the hardware side, we have, of course, the existing players, Ericsson and Nokia, in particular Nokia, taking an active part in the OpenRAN activity. We see not so much movement yet, or at least I did not see so much movement yet of entries by European players, but there are ample players from the US and from Japan who have taken up this OpenRAN opportunity. Next slide, please. Now, you may think that the intervention of the OpenRAN community leads to a fork in the road in terms of standardization of 5G. Luckily, that is not the case. It is more like a fast forward in making the decision on the open front haul earlier than anticipated by defining the interface and also defining the maintenance and upkeep. The fact that the OpenRAN Alliance has already started a public access process with ETSI to integrate the efforts of their specification into the current standardization stream through ETSI to 3GPP shows that we are on path in terms of this intervention. Moreover, if you think about cybersecurity, a very sensitive topic, clearly also the OpenRAN community makes use of the best practices which are established in 3GPP. Next slide, please. And then, of course, if you introduce a new interface and allow operators to mix and match equipment of multiple vendors, you have to also assure that they work together properly. And for that purpose, the OpenRAN Alliance initiative includes a special task force, as well as test and integration centers, which are set up across the globe. One example here is in Madrid, in the premises of the Telefonica, set up to make sure that all new equipment is tested against each other and is proven before it is deployed into the field. Also, plugfests are organized to stimulate the testing of collaboration and combination of the various equipments. Next slide, please. Now, the efforts that are going on are on a very fast schedule, because the idea is that we should have OpenRAN ready for field deployment by the time the operators are planning their mass deployment of 5G radio. And this is foreseen starting or ramping up essentially in 2023, 2024. So this is all about making sure that integration of new equipment is all done and the equipment is ready for field-grade deployment by that time. And that is what I would like to share with you, and I like to give back the floor to Mark to introduce the economic impact of the open interfaces. Thank you very much.
So thank you, Walter, for this presentation, this part of the presentation. So now we are going to move to the second part of the presentation about the economic impact of open interfaces in general. So next slide, please. So we consider, so in this report, in this research, that the introduction of OpenRAN, so in the telecommunication sector, represents a change of market structure or market organization from a situation where traditional integrated equipment suppliers sell complete end-to-end systems to mobile operators to another type of situations where the suppliers sell specific components, not necessarily all of them, and operators can mix and match network components from different vendors, from different OpenRAN vendors, and these components can interwork with each other across open interfaces. What we argue is that OpenRAN and open interfaces, more generally, favors the transition from what we call a closed market organization, where you have end-to-end systems that are sold to operators, from an open or a more open market organization, where there is this possibility of mixing and matching. And this opening up of the market organization, in our view, has large potential benefits. The first type of benefit is that it can lead to a larger variety of systems. And why is it so? It's because there is this entry of new vendors, and operators can mix and match components from different vendors, and therefore they have access as a consequence to a wider variety of telecommunication systems. And also because they can pick for each component the supplier that provides either the lowest cost or the highest quality for this specific component, then it can lead overall to lower total cost for operators when they design their systems and deploy them, and also to more optimized, higher quality systems. So what we argue in the report, and the key point here, is that these large potential benefits can materialize only to the extent, and this is the main critical requirement, that enough new participants enter the supply chain, providing these specific components, allowing then operators to mix and match, as I have explained. So this is the critical condition. Next slide, please. So this is the first effect of OpenRAN and open interfaces in general. Due to this opening of the value chain, this possibility of mixing and matching components from different suppliers, it can lead to lower prices and a larger variety of systems for operators. So we see also a second type of potential benefit that comes from the relation between this kind of innovation and open interfaces and the business models of the industry players. So we argue that the overall impact of OpenRAN will depend on which business model is eventually adopted for OpenRAN, or more generally for open interfaces. So a first possible scenario, which can be thought of as a first extreme in a way, is a status quo situation where, for example, mobile operators remain integrated sellers of communication solutions and purchase inputs, network components from other suppliers to do so. So in this scenario of the pipeline traditional business model, then OpenRAN can deliver cost reductions and quality improvements, as I have explained, but it will be in a sense limited to that. And we see a second type of scenario where there is a change of business models that can generate even higher benefits to the industry and to the society, and which would involve a change of business model. So in this scenario, the technology OpenRAN develops as a platform where suppliers of hardware and software components, and possibly service providers, are brought together and orchestrated. So there are different questions that are raised with this kind of business model. One is, who would be the potential manager or orchestrator of the OpenRAN platform? So it could be the traditional equipment suppliers, but it could be also the mobile operators themselves, each solution having its potential pros and cons. So next slide, please. So to finish this presentation, so we are going to explain what are our key recommendations following this analysis, and I'm going to give back the floor to Walter to present the first set of recommendations.
Ladies and gentlemen, given the short time we have to meet the window of opportunity, our first recommendation is that we recommend to limit interventions which may introduce significant uncertainty for suppliers or operators. Point one. Point two is to make optimal use of the opportunities that are offered by the OpenRAN initiative. We recommend that interventions are avoided which may restrict the diversity of supply in the network or in the supply base of the operator. And as the OpenRAN is introducing new elements and is well organized with their own specification activities, we recommend that any public testing and R&D activities are to be complementary to those activities that are taking place under the auspices of the OpenRAN Alliance, rather than being redundant. That would be a waste of time and effort. And finally, we recommend to allow the industry to collaborate, in particular on the testing and the development of the OpenRAN, and on the development of the standards, to assure that we have good equipment ready for field deployment, fully tested before it goes into the field. Thank you, and I'm returning the floor back.
So I think we go now to
Mark for the second
Mark for the second set of recommendations.
So let me present now the second set of recommendations. So next slide, please. So another recommendation is that we view that we have potential concerns that maybe there could be disputes between participants. So for OpenRAN, which might have the effect of delaying the development of the technology. And so we think it's important for policymakers to be prepared to intervene quickly if such disputes arise. And what we recommend is maybe that there should be an independent specialist body dealing with this kind of problems to do some kind of arbitration. Secondly, so we think it's important also for policymakers to support collaboration amongst small MNOs for joint procurement of OpenRAN and joint testing, because we see a possible competitive disadvantage for small MNOs relative to large MNOs for the development of OpenRAN, and so joining forces could help them to solve this problem. And lastly, we argue that it's important that the market and policymakers do not inhibit the emergence of new business models, such as the platform business model, which may look very new, but also which may be better placed to exploit the full potential of these technologies like OpenRAN and more generally the 5G technologies. So thank you very much, and I'll give back the floor to Bruno.
This presentation. I'd like now to introduce our panel who will discuss that, and as usually we make sure that we have around the table the various perspectives, obviously the industry perspective, but also the regulators and the tech industry, and of course the Commission. And let me start with this, with the last one. Very happy to welcome Peter Struckmann, who is head of unit and deputy director at DG Connect at the European Commission. Javier Villegas Burgos, deputy head of the Brussels office of Vodafone. Javier is Deputy Head, Government Relations and Policy Engagement. Audrey Scozzaro-Ferrazzini, Senior Director, Government Affairs, EMEA at Qualcomm. And last but not least, René Artica, Economic Advisors at the UK telecom regulator, Qualcomm. So I'd like perhaps first to ask you in 3 minutes max to tell us first of all what you like most in Javier. Javier, very shortly, we will go deeper into the pros and cons and good things and perhaps more arguable things in the report. But the things you liked most, what are they?
Can I check that you hear me okay, given the gremlins we've had and some background noise?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for having me. So there are three things that I'm actually representing the OpenRAN MOU group, so not Vodafone, my company, but as well Deutsche Telekom, Orange team, and Telefonica. So when I say we, I mean all of us. There are three things that we would highlight that we liked in the report. The first one is that you acknowledged in the report the transformative nature and potential of OpenRAN, and that has come through as well in the presentations at the beginning of this event quite clearly. The platform concept, the ability to collaborate between different players to creatively build the infrastructure for various use cases. That's super important to understand. The second one is the fact that you're emphasizing the window opportunity and the fact that time is actually of the essence to get things on the road. Because this is for us about future-proofing our supply chain for the way that networks will be built already now and in the future. OpenRAN is like 6E. It is going to happen. And it's just a matter of whether you get it right or not. And number three, we do value the independence of SER in putting the report together, the fact that you've made us think about things that we weren't thinking about before. So you are pushing a little bit the boundaries of the mental space in which OpenRAN needs to be debated.
Okay, thank you very much, Javier. Your image was frozen, so perhaps you can, I don't know, you can try to do something about that, or perhaps our technician can give you offline some advice. Let's move perhaps now to to Qualcomm. Audrey Scozzaro-Ferrazzini, of course, you're not a telco, not a regulator. What's your perspective on that?
Thank you, Bruno. Can I assume you hear me well? Yes, thank you. Thanks, Peter. So thanks, Bruno. Thanks, everybody. So are we telco or not? We're working a lot with the telecom world, so we're part of this family, let's put it that way. Wanted to tell you that I'm jumping in for my colleague Luigi Ardito, who is not feeling well today. So giving you a little bit of our perspective. So we do like the report, and I wanted to share with you some of the findings that we believe are important in this report. So the first one is that we do concur that significant progress has already been made to develop OpenRAN, to introduce new suppliers into the RAN supply chain, that all firms will need consistency and clarity from policymakers if they are to make investment required to enable large-scale commercialization, and that there remain risks that individual firms may seek to disrupt or delay development or exploit them unfairly for their advantage. The second one, we agree with STER that open interfaces can stimulate innovative entry into the supply chain of hardware and software components, which can in turn lead to more competitive and more resilient supply chain and lower cost, of course. OpenRAN can create opportunities for new and traditional providers to support this goal by helping to foster innovation across industry. This rapidly increases the choice of components like Qualcomm, okay, but others as well, and therefore the potential to innovate and meet the demands for fast-growing variety of different use cases and application. The last point, when it comes to the recommendation, the report offers a good set of logical recommendations deriving from a thorough analysis. In particular, we do agree that the immediate concern for European policymakers should be to ensure that the current activities of ORAN undertaken by public and private bodies successfully translate into the development of competitive and diverse ORAN supply chain, and their products are then integrated into the deployment of virtualized RAN, which operators will undertake within the next few years. Policymakers should support entry by and competition from new suppliers of ORAN equipment, irrespective of their country of origin, and they should allow operators the freedom to mix and match components in their networks to best meet their commercial needs. So in summary, I'm just saying that somebody is calling Qualcomm on the chat, but we'll look at it after. A very good report focused on a topic that has the potential to bring massive amount of opportunities and innovation in Europe. And we do believe as Qualcomm that ensuring a high level of political support, incentivizing and supporting European OpenRAN development, creating a roadmap for network innovation should be top priority for European government and policymakers. And we do hope that the contribution with the SARE report can contribute to this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Audrey, and thank you for, I understand, having accepted just a few minutes before the start of this to take over from a colleague who has had a last-minute serious trouble. So let's move now to the regulator's perspective. René, from Ofcom, very briefly, the things you like about the report, and I know you may have other comments later, but let's first start on the positive things. Let's eat our white bread before the gray bread.
Okay. Yeah. So in terms of positives, Ofcom, RCEP, and Comreg found the technology section and the economic section to be interesting and useful. So in particular, it provides or enables readers to understand the evolution of the RAN ecosystem and therefore the potential challenges that OpenRAN might face. It provided many insights into the potential market dynamics of OpenRAN. And then as an Ofcom specific point, we were kind of in agreement that in terms of the technology section, that there can't be any decisive assessments or conclusions yet on the technological impact of OpenRAN, given the stage that it's currently at in its development. But we did find that section nonetheless provided a useful overview of the state of play and the current actors. And then in terms of the economic section, at least as the economic advisor at Ofcom, I certainly found that section provided a clear and I would argue comprehensive overview of the market characteristics and the potential economic effects that OpenRAN might face, or I guess open markets, since it's more broad, really, the paper would face. And I think that analysis in the report provides a good foundation for any further economic analysis. But having said that, there are a few issues and caveats that the regulators have highlighted and would like to comment on.
Okay, thank you very much. At this stage, I'd like to introduce Peter Struckmann and perhaps ask him in an, of course, much less directive way, an open way. What do you think about this report, Peter? How does it fit with the current thinking of the Commission or the plans of the Commission about OpenRAN? If you could enlighten us on that, that would be very helpful.
Many thanks, Bruno. Dear colleagues, really nice to be here. It's an honor to be invited to comment a bit on this interesting report. Yeah, so let's start with some positives, as you suggested, Bruno. So I think it was a good reading. It was a comfortable reading. So especially the spirit we are in a world where if we ensure a good level of competition, all will be fine. So allows us to see the world in these days without political realities, the crisis we went through and that we are in. So in that sense, nice reading, but just to say a bit some elements that we would take away. So I think a bit like what René just said, we see nicely here the potential of an open market organization. We from a competition perspective, of course, we don't want to introduce necessary competition only for the sake of it. So what at the end counts is the outcome for consumers, for businesses, and also let's not get the externalities, which also includes maybe some risks that we want to look at. So we found the scenario is rather simple, but of course then makes it quite illustrative, of course, also to understand, yeah, like more on the one hand open, on the other side close. In the reality might be a bit between the two and a bit more complex. So I think it's useful also to have these recommendations. They are, of course, based on some simplified assumptions. So considering this is the way to go, we want OpenRAN now and fast, what we should do. But certainly useful hints of what to watch out for. I think that was a very good takeaway to see what are the areas where you would like the policymakers to look at and to follow and then possibly help or intervene. On the negative side, if you allow, just some critical views. So if we turn it around and look at the world from a maybe different angle, so what is actually the world we live in now? We think the world has changed considerably in the last years. So I had a bit of the impression to read this more from a like competition policy angle, maybe 8 years ago, to say, okay, let's look at that more from a conceptual point of view. But of course, things happened. The EU-China geopolitics, COVID, now Ukraine, and economic crisis. So we should certainly also have a look at the risks, even if that was maybe not the main purpose of the report, I acknowledge. So the security risks we think a bit downplayed, so not referring much to the NIST report that gives a lot of different perspectives there. Network information security, the report that came out beginning of this year, might be helpful to read together with the report. For example, what about new dependencies? Yeah, what think about hyperscalers, think about chip monopolies. It sounds a bit like let's mix and match no matter where the equipment comes from. So let's not forget the European position also and the need for Europe. There I might refer to a bit also this study that we published last year, Commission study with different scenarios. So maybe it can be complemented to this report, having a bit of a broader perspective. So what is the best path for Europe, not only based on economic considerations in the midterm? So that would be my first thoughts. And then I understand we have some further points later maybe to raise. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Peter. Perhaps we could take immediately your point on security perspectives, which you say are missing. It's clear that I think when the report started, the preparation of the report started, I think it was before the document you mentioned. But perhaps Marc, can you say something about that?
Sure. So thank you. So this is indeed a good point. And so in the report and in the study we looked at this issue so maybe more extensively than what is shown currently in the final report. And this is indeed a critical problem. So nonetheless, so we think that probably the potential benefits of OpenRAN probably outweigh the security risk. So this is the first message, I think. And the second thing, I think what is important is that so this kind of technology like OpenRAN or open interfaces in general, their potential benefits really depend on how successful they are in attracting new players in the marketplace. And so we understand and we agree that there should be some things about security and cyber security in particular, and the resilience of this infrastructure. We believe that to maximize the network effects in this type of environment, so this kind of condition should concern really technical aspects of the technology rather than where the technology comes from. And so maybe this is not a common view in Europe, but this is the type of view that we want to push to say that, okay, see, if we think about security, we can have some security standards that supplier of OpenRAN components should satisfy. But in the same way, whether they are European or non-European, because so if in the end the problem is security, well, there should be security standards, and it's not necessarily about where the technology comes from, because there can be technology problems, security problems also from suppliers inside the EU. So this is the thing that we want to push, I think.
Okay, thank you. Before we move to we go back to the sponsors and the participants. Sorry, to the participants, to the speakers. I want you to take a question which one of the viewers has put, and that is about the Nacho Moreno is asking what kind of impact could the scarce of 5G spectrum in hand of operators have in this kind of new platform business, and the impact of the 5G security toolbox. Walter, can you answer that, please?
Sure, Bruno. I don't think that the opening up of the front haul interface has an impact on the allocation of radio frequency spectrum or the use of radio frequency spectrum. What we might say is that optimization of the RAN, which is made possible through the RAN intelligent controller, may give us an opportunity to optimize the use of the available radio frequency space that is being allocated to 5G and the future space that will be allocated. So maybe even a better use, because we can optimize using artificial intelligence.
Okay, thank you. Can I move now to the members of the steering committee? The speakers, in fact, represent the steering committee, which was made up of operators, regulators, and the academic team. So, René, can you perhaps say what you would diverge with, or you would qualify in the report, or you don't feel too comfortable with? Let's get some information here.
Yeah, so I think in terms of at least the economic section, and perhaps this also could extend to the technical section, there's not a clear conclusion, at least from what I can tell, from the regulators can tell, about whether or not OpenRAN is beneficial. So it sets out quite a few caveats when doing the economic assessment, which I think is fair enough. But you can see some circumstances based on the report where OpenRAN may not be beneficial. So as an example, without credible market entry, or if operators are likely to end up picking the same components as each other, and therefore there isn't much mixing, matching, or kind of innovation on that side, then I think the report suggests that there'll be limited or indeed no benefits from OpenRAN, and you prefer a closed system. I think what the report could either have done or a further analysis could do is produce a comparative assessment of specific use cases that span across the likely range of OpenRAN deployments and business models, and to kind of assess, given these use cases or in these scenarios, it would be beneficial or it wouldn't be beneficial. I think that would have been kind of a better landing position or a better final position for the economic assessment. RCEP also believes that the authors may not have interviewed stakeholders that are more skeptical about the success and viability of OpenRAN. And also there's some concerns we have on the policy recommendations, mostly the second set of recommendations that were mentioned I think the first set of 4 recommendations we're broadly happy with. I don't know if I have time to elaborate on our concerns around the recommendations, or if you want to save that for later.
Go ahead, please.
Okay, so one of the recommendations is talking about establishing a body that can arbitrate the supply chain disputes in a manner that is kind of described as being, I think, well, when it's described, where the regulators assessed it and thought that's quite an idealistic position to be in. So such a body, such an arbitrator body would face challenges in terms of meeting the criteria that were set out in the paper. So in particular, being able to act quickly and without appeal, I think would be challenging. And in any case, any arbitrating body would need to be compatible with the existing legal framework. So again, that creates some challenges around creating this almost hypothetical or theoretical arbitrator that's mentioned in terms of the recommendation. On top of that, the recommendation about suitability for joint procurement, I think would depend on the market context, so vary across countries in particular. And also, we kind of found that recommendation of supporting, I think it was, joint procurement as being potentially undermining any resilience objective. It could ultimately reduce the diversity of vendors in the market, and indeed there could be competition implications around supporting that joint procurement. Not saying it's necessarily the case, but I think just reading that recommendation, there were certain concerns around the elements I just mentioned. And then finally, the last recommendation that's talking about not preventing new business models such as platforms, but then also raising, I think in the report, it then raises concerns in terms of anti-competitive behavior that might arise from platforms. True as a sort of theoretical point, but it's not very clear from the recommendation what any policymaker, whether it's regulator or government, would actually do in those circumstances, and perhaps maybe elaborating on either specific business models, specific platform models, and then providing real use cases. So for example, the Rakuten communication platform, and then assessing that and sort of giving a real life example of where competition concerns could arise, or indeed competition concerns haven't arisen, rather than stating what I would classify as theoretical or hypothetical situations.
Thank you. There are quite a number of points there. Perhaps I'll give the floor back to Javier, and then after to Audrey. Javier, perhaps to share with us what are your views on some points you may diverge with, or want to clarify, or including recommendations, and perhaps also a reaction what you have just heard from the regulators.
Indeed, thank you, Bruno, and everyone. I was very good at the beginning, being super quick to catch up with lost time. I'm going to allow myself a little bit more now, if I may. Also, because as you say, Bruno, I like to use our points to also get back to some of the other speakers. So in terms of shortfalls that we see in the report, one general, if you like, shortcoming, if I may say that, is that sometimes it elaborates on more theoretical concerns, things that could materialize in the very distant future or not materialize, and for which remedies already exist, for example, under competition law. And perhaps because of the history around when the project started, etc., it does not address satisfactorily other concerns that are more front of mind in the current debates. So I will use security as a clear example of that. And I think Peter mentioned this when talking about the view of the European Commission. The report that came out in May from the NIS Cooperation Group is a fairly factual and balanced report that needs to be taken very seriously, and we have, and we are, and we will. And there's absolutely no point trying to work around that. We have to work into that report and come up with the answers. There's a dedicated group in the OpenRAN MOU that I represent, which is working on formal responses and solutions. And so there is in the ORAN Alliance, which I do not represent, but it's obviously part of the conversation that we're having. Some of those risks do actually come specifically with OpenRAN, or in a more notorious way with OpenRAN. Some of those are actually common to cloudification and virtualization. They're not exclusive to OpenRAN, but doesn't mean they don't need to be worked upon. And there are some benefits as well in the security landscape from using OpenRAN, which we're always very happy to explain, but we're definitely not saying that because those benefits are there, they actually outweigh the issues. We feel that the issues need to be worked upon regardless, which will then render the balance absolutely positive once we're done with all of them. So when it comes to security advantages, which we have, and when it comes to economic benefits that would accrue from OpenRAN, we're very happy that they do exist, but we're definitely not saying that that should actually lead to complacency in terms of solving the security issues. I would just highlight something that perhaps could have been explored more in the report, but in fairness to the team who wrote it, it would have been very hard then to see it. But look at OpenRAN now and look at what the Commission is doing with the Cyber Resilience Act, which effectively is introducing market surveillance and conformity assessment mechanisms for practically everything, products with digital components and software. That actually works when you have a very disaggregated landscape that you can assess for conformity, that you can certify, and that you can actually put through a scrutiny. And OpenRAN, because of its very nature, does allow for that disaggregation. And we feel it's going to work really, really well with the cybersecurity regime that the Commission wants to introduce. So it all needs to be put in the pot. That would have been great to do in the report, but it would have been difficult at the time the work started to perhaps connect those dots. A second point that we felt could have been better is the lack of a strategic discussion around precisely what you, Peter, highlighted, the way the world has changed. And we see this with the Commission. The Commission is no longer about competition orthodoxy. It's no longer about, the internal market needs to work. Member states cannot promote their own companies, etc., etc. The Commission is now more global and more geopolitical. It's more about what's going on outside and how do we protect ourselves, assert our rights, and improve our competitive edge. And the report could have perhaps explored more the philosophy behind OpenRAN. OpenRAN actually opens the door for many suppliers which come from overseas. And that is tricky in the current day and age. And one of the things that we really need to explore is which are the opportunities that it is presenting for European companies. When you do break up the stack in the way that OpenRAN does, and it has been explained by Mark and Walter, you are effectively creating opportunities for European companies, software companies, people who've been in adjacent markets thinking that this was not their game. The platform for creation or collaborative creation concept is super important to look at that, and perhaps we could have given that a bit more of a push in the report to really look at the strategic significance of those possibilities for the indigenous European industry and to address the geopolitics that Peter Struckmann referred to. Third point, but it is related, and I'll be a lot quicker on this one, a little bit more on the technology gap. When looking at the window of opportunity and the need to act quickly, which are highlighted in the report, let's look at not just why this is interesting for operators to see happen quickly. Why is it interesting for everybody else, for the wider ecosystem? Is actually jumping on OpenRAN now a way to avoid a big technology gap opening between our several industries that could benefit from this and the rest of the world? If we do allow the US, Japan, Korea, Australia, India, etc., to take the lead on specifying OpenRAN, and we fail to put money and political support behind companies in Europe who want to develop European solutions under OpenRAN to the problems we can solve, then what is that actually doing to our long-term stance? So it is not a negative, it's perhaps something that could have been explored a little bit further. And with this, I will conclude. Happy to maybe go a little bit deeper if time allows later on. Thank you, Bruno.
Thank you very much, Javier. I was wondering, before we move to Audrey, who has, I think, a number of points to make. Also, Peter, can I ask you perhaps to come in and react to what you've heard from both René and Javier?
Yes, why not? Thanks, Bruno. So I think it was indeed also quite in line with I mentioned when we talk about scope. So I think we have to position the report to say, okay, this is a good illustration of the potential of OpenRAN, but of course the story should be broader. And then, of course, maybe just to respond a bit on the security, indeed, when you look at the NIST report, it's, of course, cybersecurity, if it's a bit strict, can be interpreted as a strict limitation on technical issues to solve, and then we're ready to go. But of course, there are also some, and Javier mentioned the term, and some more sovereignty or dependence issues that we also have to look at, and it was raised. I mean, if you open the stack, as Javier said, what is then the scenario we're going into? And this we have to look at from a cloud perspective, from a microelectronics perspective, and then also see what are new dependencies that we have to look at. In general, of course, we're not against. I mean, we see that as a market trend, and that certainly has some potential. And as governments, we're not necessarily in the position to intervene here with pushing a technology option. So we would, of course, then also there's some recommendations that are very useful in the report on cooperation. That's something that we're doing very much in our programs. So we offer this platform, short-term, long-term. We have the 6G partnership, Smart Networks and Services. We have the other programs like Digital Europe program, where we can do a number of things. So I think we have the platform for cooperation ready. And there we see more a role to say, okay, if the industry players are interested in going this direction, there's a possibility to work on the technical challenges, on standardization, so that we move forward. Yeah, so that's just to react on the latest statements from the colleagues.
Okay, thank you, Peter. I'm moving now to Audrey. Audrey, you see some challenges, I think, in what we've been talking about so far.
Yes, Bruno, and I would say not much challenges, but some kind of area of improvement in the report that I wanted to highlight, that I discussed with Luigi first. But before saying that, I wanted to say that I agree with everything that Javier has said, and understand as well, the point that Peter highlighted. So I think that there is a kind of common understanding in it. In terms of areas of improvement, so I will be less geostrategy and more into some of the details. Sorry about that, even if I prefer to talk about geopolitical strategy. But regarding one of the suggestions on the small MNOs and potential collaboration for joint procurement, as an example, we believe it's kind of a good idea, but maybe this is where there could be additional report, Bruno, or trying to understand a little bit how this could be done. So it's one of the first points wanted to highlight. The other one is more like a call for policymakers. So Peter, you mentioned this kind of potential cooperation, collaboration, which is very good. If there could be more kind of concrete examples, I know it's tricky for report, but that could be as well something that we would foresee. Some good example that would be very good. And the last one, and it's more about the future and maybe some of the future program for you, Peter, what OpenRAN means for kind of private network as an example, or as well how OpenRAN will play into the development of 6G. We don't have an answer yet, but just looking at the future, what this new technology could bring to the market and to the community. So not like negative comment, Bruno, but more like kind of future food for thought on behalf of Qualcomm. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Audrey. Marc, we've heard a number of things coming from our guests this afternoon. I'd be happy for your reactions, and perhaps we could relaunch the debate from there.
Okay, so thank you, Bruno. And thank you for all your comments and feedbacks and criticism, because I think it helps also to have this kind of debate to move forward. And so the general thought that I had when I was listening to all your comments is that OpenRAN, so it looks at the beginning, at least for me, a specific technology, but in the end, what we see is that it raises many key questions about the industry and about Europe and policy. So it raises questions about how it could affect competition and innovation, and this is what basically the report dealt with. It asks questions about how regulation should respond to the possible changes in competition or innovation. It also raises important questions about industrial policy, sovereignty, and which are important topics, of course, but we needed to focus on something, so we did not deal with these questions. But it's quite remarkable, I think, that this kind of technology and technological change raises so many questions. But indeed, so we are in a world at a crossroads for many things right now, and OpenRAN is reflecting this in a way through this list of questions. This is a general thought, so maybe more specific response to what you said also. So in particular to René's comments, I completely take these comments and criticisms, there is no problem. So I think what we aim to do is to provide a grid of analysis, which has always pros and cons. So a grid of analysis, the good thing is that it can be applied in many cases. The bad thing is that it's a bit generic, it may look theoretical in a way. But this is we thought it was useful to provide this kind of grid, because we thought it was lacking so in the debate, and so we provided this kind of analysis rather than looking at specific cases. And for the recommendation, so we should make clear that these recommendations should not be taken in absolute terms. So this is of course to be balanced with other important aspects in specific contexts, like other competition aspects or market structure or other things, and then so it's always a matter of balancing different objectives in the end. So thank you, Bruno.
Thank you. We have some people who are reacting quite negatively to what we are discussing, and challenge, in fact, the possibility for OpenRAN simply to become relevant. John Strand writes here, if OpenRAN gets the growth its proponents predict, it will account for less than 1% of the 5G mobile site in 2025, not more than 3% in 2030. How do you see that, Javier? And Audrey, sorry.
So I'm happy to go. I'm happy to go first. I fail to see the consistency between this question and the question that challenges the Vodafone announcement made in the Mobile World Congress, saying that we'd be able, or we committed to covering 30% of our networks with OpenRAN by 2030. I find it hard to answer questions for which I don't see the underlying logic. But I also wonder whether these are valid debates. This is not about the commercial success of OpenRAN or the technology achievements that we are able to achieve or not. This really should be about a transformation that is taking place globally, where we do not want to lag behind in Europe. And we need to do this in a way that is good for telcos, that is good for the several industry verticals that we digitize on a daily basis, that is right for the geopolitical stance of the European Union and Europe as a whole. And I find it very distracting to try and answer this question, to be very honest.
No, I'm not responsible. We are not responsible for the question which are being put, and but I just wanted to hear you on that, and I don't know who that gentleman is, by the way, because it's not mentioned the affiliation. Audrey, please. We don't hear you, Audrey. Muted. Voilà.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So Bruno, I apologize. I got distracted for a few seconds. What was the question? Because there are many questions. So sorry. What was the question exactly?
No, the question was about the fact that if OpenRAN gets the growth its proponent predicts, it will account for less than 1% of the 5G mobile site 2025, not more than 3% in 2030.
Okay, so well, I think I'm going to say like Javier. It's difficult. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't think that anyone has a crystal ball. But as Javier said, it's a bit like the train has left the station. There are countries already deploying OpenRAN or doing some kind of cooperation work. To my knowledge, there are some projects in the US. There are some projects in India. I think as well there are some projects in Japan, Korea, question mark. I don't want to say something which is wrong. So some countries are going into this direction. If the numbers are here already, it's difficult to say, but probably, this is when there is a new technology. I would say that, if we would say, what's the market share of 5G 5 years ago, close to zero. Okay, so you need for the technology to take up, and then, there will be scale. That would be my answer.
Okay, fine. Unfortunately we just have six minutes left. I don't know, Peter, at this stage, what would be for you any follow-up to this kind of work that SER has done in this area? What would be useful when we look at possible future developments for OpenRAN?
Very good, Bruno. Can you still hear me? I had my headset was out of battery, but so it seems to work. Very good. Yeah, takeaways. Maybe to summarize a bit also the discussion, I think it's important that we are aware of the scope, so how we position it. So let's broaden the scope beyond the telecoms, for the impact of OpenRAN, but maybe also when we talk about diversification and market issues. So it's not only about telecoms. There are areas, think about chips and even cloud service providers, where I think it's also very concentrated, even more in some areas than telecoms. So that's certainly something that we always insist on. So let's read it together with or think it together with other, a bit broader. Let's not be too black and white. I think it's nicely illustrative here, but important to say, to be aware that it's not open or closed. So the future will be more complex. And if I take the suggestion from Audrey to look at it also from a 6G perspective, and I think all market players agree that there's a path towards software networks, toward cloudification. So all the suppliers across the board are seeing that, and also seeing a room for OpenRAN in this landscape. So the question is then to say, okay, what kind of interfaces does it make sense to open up? What kind of interfaces it's good to to keep proprietary because you have efficiency gains, you have energy efficiency gains, performance issues, and so on. So in that sense, I think then it's not a decision for us here to take at policy level to say we want this and do it everywhere. So it's a bit more complex. And that maybe leads us to the takeaways on the standardization work or the pre-standardization work also, where we certainly have the possibility to work together. And this call for cooperation is useful, I think. Also short-term, long-term. So we also have the IPCI proposals that are under review in the Commission, which are promising. We have the more longer-term work, and we received quite a lot of proposals. We will soon announce the outcome of the call next month in the SNS, so Smart Networks and Services, which is the 6G programmer, where you have a lot of work on these open interfaces, which shows it's promising, but it shows also there's a lot of work to do. Voila, I think this for me are the main takeaways. And also, yeah, then of course in the recommendations, we take note of the issues you point to, yeah, so to watch the space, to see also how the standardization landscape is evolving, what are the behaviors of different players, and that's of course important to be aware of and to follow. So this is well noted. Many thanks.
Thank you very much. Mark and Walter, any final takeaway that you have on this? Walter?
I'm very happy with the feedback in terms that the foundation is there, but we could have expanded. That's always possible. We always have a project that is constrained in time and in volume, but there are good suggestions for follow-through in terms of scenarios on how, excuse me, how certain forces in the market may play out and how that could benefit us in the industry, but also more broadly. And I'm glad also that the notion of 6G comes up, because we cannot always have the timing perfectly in hand. So if we lose out in 5G, there is always the opportunity to take the benefits into the definition phase of 6G. And I think that's also a very important notion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. So my conclusion is that this is a technology that has the potential to open up the supply chain and allow for entry of new players. And so, of course, it raises technological problems or some economic concerns. But I think a technology that has the potential to stimulate entry is something good. And so we should give it a chance and, of course, be careful about the developments.
Okay, thank you. And thank you very much to first of all to the panel for having participated to this. I just want to make a few comments. I've followed the project process. It was a complicated process, clearly, because it was relatively polarized, and I really praise and compliment my two colleagues, Marc Bourreau and Walter Lemstra, for having stuck to their line, which was independence and trying to base themselves on facts and on factual evidence, and then to make the analysis and draw a number of conclusions. And I think their conclusions are very balanced. But perhaps not being an expert, I just want to say that I think that this report is an important one, and I think it's widely. And I suppose it is so because OpenRAN is interesting from a quadruple perspective, at least as far as I'm concerned. First, technologically, competitively, strategically, and politically. And first, technologically, Walter has explained to us, it opens, it provides a new network architecture for mobile networks, and of course it can bring about a number of wide-ranging and fundamental changes to how mobile networks, and 5G in particular, could be supplied, could be configured, could be operated in the future. And I think I take there also the point which was made about security, which of course is an important one. My second point is that this could have, of course, significant consequences for both the operators who purchase the 5G infrastructure equipment and those who supply it. And as Walter has explained us in the beginning of his speech, we have on the one hand a number of we have Chinese players which are barred from supplying 5G infrastructure in many jurisdictions, in particular in Europe and in the US. Second, we know that the number of non-Chinese suppliers is, for the moment, extremely limited at a global level. So I think that if we play it rightly, the development of OpenRAN could have a positive impact on the future competitive situation in many markets. Thirdly, and I think this was also mentioned by Peter, OpenRAN has, because of its very nature, the potential to contribute to the resilience of our country's supply chain for advanced telecommunication infrastructure. And I think that if it was to do so, well, then I think that OpenRAN would contribute certainly significantly to the objective of EU strategic autonomy. But finally, I think for all the above potentially positive benefits of OpenRAN to become reality, I would argue, and I take this on my own responsibility and not committing my two colleagues, I would say that there need to be, on behalf of policymakers, a clear intent to develop an assertive and comprehensive industrial policy. And this should not, and I insist, this should not necessarily involve the injection of public money. And I think that, in fact, the report make the point that the case for public money injection is not necessarily demonstrated. But what should be there is certainly R&D encouragement, as well as standardization efforts. And this is something which has to be conducted jointly by industry and public authority. Second, a robust competition framework which efficiently prevents any abuse of dominance on behalf of any of the current or future large players in the area, and on the contrary, stimulates the arrival of new players on the market. Next point, a set of partnerships with third countries with whom we can realistically, without, when I say realistically, I mean without being naive, share common goals, industry goals. And finally, I think, and that is the point is made in the report, a stable regulatory environment providing visibility for the significant investment required on behalf of the industry. I don't think money is necessary, but I think it's clear that not over-intervention is necessary as well. And to conclude, I personally think that the current Commission has already, in a number of digital and other areas, demonstrated its willingness to act along the above principles, and I would personally encourage it to do the same with regard to OpenRAN. So this is what I wanted to leave you with at the end of this session. Sorry again for having to make it shorter because we started late. I thank everybody, the speakers, the viewers, the authors, and I hope to meet you soon for another SARE meeting, and I hope in the meantime my voice will have recovered. Thank you very much. Have a great afternoon. See you soon.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you.